We continue our coverage now of yesterday's decision by the Arizona Supreme Court to uphold a pre-statehood law that bans almost all abortions except for those needed to save the life of the mother. The punishment for those performing or aiding an abortion, a mandatory 2 to 5 years in prison. Joining us now to talk about her support of the ruling is prominent pro-life activist Kathy Herod of Center for Arizona Policy. Good to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Your thoughts on the ruling?
It was the right ruling. It was the right legal outcome. The justices were deciding on an issue of statutory construction. Which law would be in effect, the 15-week limit or the pre-roll law that prohibits abortions unless necessary to save the life of the mother? For all those who think that judges should interpret the law and not make policy, this was a tremendous victory because the judges did what they're supposed to do. They said, here's the law that goes into effect. The policy's up to the lawmakers.
And again, statutory, not constitutional significance. That's what you're saying here, correct?
Exactly. No issue of constitutional significance. The state constitution was at play in this. The judges, the 4 justices actually said that the proponents of overturning the pre-roll law could now refile within 14 business days. They could refile in the lower court if they wanted to, a constitutional challenge. So again, it was only a statutory construction, which statute would be in effect.
So, but is it a good thing, just in general? I know I know you want to focus on the law aspect, but as far as Arizona is concerned, is it a good thing for a 160 plus, whatever it is, year-old law to supersede something that lawmakers addressed in 2022? Addressed with, I think, a small a there, because they did leave something very important out, did they not?
Well, the lawmakers in 2022 addressed both. And it's important to note when everyone loves to say it's the 1864 law or whatever, this law was actually in effect the day that the U.S. Supreme Court handed down Roe v. Wade. So it was in effect on January 22nd, 1973. The Arizona legislature even reaffirmed it in a vote in the late 70s. And then they have never repealed it. So the 2022 law was structured in a way that 15-week limit would be the law in Arizona. However, if Roe v. Wade was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court, then the legislature and Governor Ducey at the time said the pre-roll law would go back into effect and abortions would not be legal in our state.
But how do you square Governor Ducey now saying, and this is his quote, "This is not the outcome I would have preferred"?
We would have to ask Governor Ducey that question.
Yes.
I would just say that we did not hide. There was the intent of the 2022 law was evident. It was in the language. It said that the statute 133603 had not been repealed, was not repealed by that law. So any lawmaker that voted on it at the time, any of the discussions at the time in 2022, it was clear what the intent of the law was.
Another comment I want you to respond to, David Schweikert, Congressman Schweikert, the issue should be decided by Arizonans and not the bench. It sounded like you just said just the opposite. The bench did not decide it.
No, and that's unfortunately Congressman Schweikert was not correct in his post that he did yesterday. This was not legislating from the bench, and this was judges doing what they're supposed to do. So it's very incorrect to say that this were 4 justices making policy. They specifically said, and read the opinion is what I would say. They specifically said that the policy was up to the lawmakers, to the legislative and executive branch. This is a great example of a decision that relies on separation of powers, how the judiciary branch works in comparison to the executive and legislative branches.
And yet, just a couple more comments here, because it's interesting to see the reaction. Representative Ciscomani, Congressman Ciscomani, quote, "disaster for women and providers." And Carrie Lake, who I know because moderated the debate where she said she was very much in favor of the territorial era law. She now says, "I oppose the ruling." All of these folks, regardless of where they were, where they are now, do they have a point that this is not good for Arizona?
Well, what's a disaster is that we have unborn children, vulnerable unborn children in the womb, their lives being taken. We have women suffering from having abortions. So our view is that unborn children deserve life, and their mothers deserve to be free of the pain and tragedy of having an abortion. So in our view, that this is about saving lives, both the lives of both mother and child.
Governor and Attorney General, both, that they're not going to enforce it. The governor obviously took the enforcement powers away from county attorneys, gave it to the Attorney General. Attorney General says she's not going to do it. She's not going to oppose the ruling. Your thoughts on that, and are you ready and willing to go to court to force her to enforce?
Well, the governor and the attorney general do not have the authority to take, to so-called take that power away. The attorney general is the duly elected law enforcement officer of the state. The same with the 15 county attorneys. They have a duty. Let me put it this way: it's a dereliction of duty for them to say that they will not enforce the law. They will not prosecute someone who's violated a law without even knowing the facts of the case. So this really goes outside the bounds of what their authority. So should there be a case that is brought forward? Should this law go into effect? And again, it could take months, if not more than a year, easily to have this law go into effect. So I think that that we still have a lot of litigation to go through. We have a lot ahead, but this is beyond the authority of the Attorney General and the Governor to dictate and say, oh, we're not going to defend this law, we're not going to enforce this law.
We talked about the legislature today. What do you think the legislature should do?
I think the legislature needs to let the people leave it alone. I think they need to remember it's a pro-life legislature. Our law favors that unborn children be given the rights and privileges of the law, same as born individuals, and I think they need to leave it alone. But I think also the legislature needs to remember what civil discourse is. What happened today on the floor of the Arizona House was uncalled for. It was unconscionable to have one side yelling, and when you said it's one Republican member and the Democrats, but to have the Democrats yelling on the floor in unison, yelling loudly, it's just, it's unfortunate. We all need to model civil discourse.
That said, there's the concern, and I know the one Republican member here, and some of the people that I quoted here are all concerned about the upcoming election, and they are concerned that this will add fuel to the fire of their opponents, and B, that ballot proposal that is out there. That would be, what is it, 24 weeks, I think, in trying?
No, it's not 24 weeks.
How long would it be?
So the so-called Arizona for Abortion Access Amendment would allow abortions at any time after viability being the time at which a baby can survive outside the mother's womb. It would allow abortions for any reason for the mother's mental health, which means late-term abortions would be legalized. This proposal on the ballot also would overturn the common sense safeguards that we have for women and children in our laws, and this is not where Arizona voters are at.
Okay, but that being said, are you concerned that what the Supreme Court did is going to add fuel to that initiative?
I believe when Arizona voters see what's in that initiative, see how far-reaching it is, that it would bring in unrestricted, unregulated abortion, that Arizona voters will give a resounding no.
Last question on this. You have been a force down at the Capitol regarding abortion issues for a long time. Judging from taking what happened yesterday into consideration, do you feel vindicated?
I have long argued that the pre-Roe law would be valid law if Roe versus Wade was overturned. So I believe, I'm an attorney. I believe I had the right legal answer. That was the right legal answer. But more than anything, I stand for protecting and defending the lives of vulnerable unborn children and their mothers. We love both mother and child, and that's who we're advocating for.
Kathy Herod, Center for Arizona Policy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.